Welcome to Navigating the Aftermath, the podcast where we explore the journey of rebuilding and rediscovery after life storms. Join us as we delve into stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation, offering insights and inspiration to guide you through your own path of healing and growth. After we go through a life-altering event like a divorce or breakup, those rom-coms we used to love suddenly take on a new meaning. Once life changes, nothing is ever quite the same. Grab your popcorn, settle in, and join us on the cinematic journey through the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of life and film at the Movie Club series where real women having a real talk without rose-colored glasses. My co-host is Courtney Shannon, aka your Coach Court. She is a women's life coach and spiritual mentor based in Scottsdale, Arizona. With her education in life coaching and intuitive guidance, Courtney helps women reconnect with their inner knowing, align with their higher selves, and achieve goals along their unique path. When she's not coaching, she loves to keep active by running outside and playing with her cute pup Homer. If you're interested in knowing more about Courtney, you can visit her online at yourcoachcourt.com or on social media at yourcoachcourt. Hi, Courtney. It's so great to be here with you.
Hi, Dasha. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I love our series about when we talk about movies, we break movies down and how some of these rom-coms that we watched when we were much younger, watching them as coaches now, such a huge difference. We see so many different layers, so many different details, and it's so much fun to see based on the characters what is like healthy relationship and healthy relationship with ourselves and with others. And today we're talking about He's Not That Into You. This movie was aired in 2009, and it's such a brilliant movie. I hope you guys have an opportunity to watch it. If you haven't watched it, I hope it will inspire you to watch this movie, or some of you who watched it a long time ago will rewatch it and find it very educational and a lot of fun. Courtney, let's give the overview. Who is who, what's going on, and then we will be sharing our thoughts about each character. I will start with Gigi, played by Jennifer Goodwin. And Gigi is a very optimistic, hopeful woman who just puts herself out there and she's looking for love. She misinterprets man's actions so much. She's the one trying to find signs, trying to find the connection, and is misguided by all of her girl's math.
That's a great way to describe it, actually. Yeah.
Can you describe Alex?
Yeah, Alex. So he's played by Justin Long. And Alex, if you guys remember, or I should say, if you ladies remember, is a bar owner and a friend to Gigi who offers her advice on understanding men's behaviors. And they eventually become romantic together. So if that helps build the connection, that's who he is.
And Beth Murphy, played by Jennifer Aniston. She works with Gigi in the same office. I'm not quite sure what they do, but they work together. And Beth is in a long-term relationship with Neil, who does not believe in marriage. And she brings it up at several occasions, and he has his own theory why he doesn't want to get married. And she struggles big time with the desire to get married and the social expectations. She sees her sister's husbands, and then eventually she says, oh my gosh, Neil, you're more husband to me, not being my non-husband, than my sister husbands. So screw this. And they found the compromise, and then he did this big gesture, and they did get married. After she's like, I don't care if we get married. I love you. I just need you.
Yeah, that was the one scene in the movie that brought me to tears because it just really, I'll dive into it later, but it just really reflected like that mutual compromise that's so important in marriage, in any relationship, really. So love that. So speaking of Neil, so he is a caring and loving boyfriend to Beth, as you described, Dasha, but has strong convictions against the institution of marriage. And so that holds him back. But as just discussed, it eventually brings them together. So that's who Neil is.
And Janine, played by Jennifer Connelly, she works with Gigi and Beth in the same office. They have their cubicles right next to each other. Janine is married to Ben, and she's extremely focused on maintaining a perfect life. And she ignores the issues in her marriage. She's been doing renovations with a very interesting style, kind of like very sharp edges and chrome and warehouse looking, like a
Very urban.
very urban, like, yeah, very lofty. And she's very fixated on him smoking. So she is constantly thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to cheat, he's going to do something. And her biggest fear, because her dad died from cancer, lung cancer, that when she found cigarettes, she's been very weirdly talking to the contractor that she had. It made me so uncomfortable. I had to just rewind it. It was forwarded, because I was like, I cannot watch it. It's so uncomfortable.
It is. Yeah. So she had found cigarettes at the construction site of their home and confronted her husband, Ben, about it, but he denied it. So then she started accusing or asking questions to the construction workers to see if the cigarettes belonged to them, because she was prying to see her husband, Ben, was lying to her about picking up his old smoking habits. Yeah, it was a confrontational scene, but I think you described it perfectly, that she's very focused on maintaining like a perfect life, a perfect image. She and Ben got married right after college, and there's a scene in the movie where Ben, her husband, is saying why he got married to her in the first place, and it was because she had given him an ultimatum after they graduated, that you either marry me or we break up. And so he married her before he was ready. So you can just feel like this tension of her trying to like keep their marriage together throughout the entire movie, because she wants that perfect life that she envisioned for herself, as a young female. So that's her story.
And then there is Anna, who is played by Scarlett Johansson, and she is a love interest of Ben. She's a yoga instructor and aspiring singer, and then she becomes involved with Ben, even though she knew that he was married, and how they ease their way into it. Like, we're friends, but then she was swimming naked in front of him, and there were like a lot of flirting happening. And then it was a very awkward scene when they were making out in his office, and then his wife Janine walked in and he pushed Anna in the closet, and how she just stayed there, and then she exploded, be like, what kind of man are you? Because she thought that he was the one, that he would leave his wife. Very attractive and very, very cool woman. So she was like, actually, I deserve better. This is who. Oh, and then Anna had Connor, who she kept him in the friend zone. So it was like very interesting character.
Yeah, for sure. We'll go to Connor next, since you just mentioned him. So Connor is kind of Anna's plan B. He had kind of been in the background of her life prior to meeting, played by Bradley Cooper. So you can kind of see this, like, I mean, we'll get into it, but the movie paints everyone's ugly sides of both men and women. And this relationship that Anna shared with Connor definitely paints that picture of, women can have similar tendencies as men in terms of kind of playing the field and keeping like a guy in the background, if you will, to like fall back on if your plan A doesn't work out. So poor Connor, he's a real estate agent who is in love with Anna, but he's stuck in the friend zone. And when Anna, when her love life isn't going as planned, she'll kind of reappear into Connor's life and give him like a glimpse or like an ounce of hope by staying the night, or telling him about her day and kind of having those like intimate conversations with him. So yeah, Connor Barry, played by Kevin Connolly. That's that relationship.
And then the last one is Mary, played by Drew Barrymore. And Mary works in the ad agency. And then she struggles with the modern dating and relying heavily on technology and social media. So she keeps putting her out there, but then she was like, I miss old just one phone number and one answering machine, and I don't have to go and look through all of this social media platforms to be rejected by 7 different technologies. So she really is longing for love, and also she is so tired of putting her out there through like online dating and stuff like this. And then at the end of the movie, she sees Connor, and then they hit it off. So they all intertwine, they all interconnected with one another, and it's so interesting to watch different dynamics in the relationships. And we will definitely have a part 2 when we dive deeper in the relationship aspect of the movie. And today we're talking more about just the characters individually and our thoughts about them. So, Courtney, what do you think? Like, what are your thoughts when you watch this movie recently from the lens of being a coach, helping women finding the relationship that they deserve with themselves and with other people? It's like, what just was like aha moment for you when you watched this movie?
Gosh, there's so much. I feel like I have to rewind a little bit because when this movie came out, was it? I think it was made in 2009, so I would have been 19 years old. And I found it entertaining. I like understood the gist of, the messages that they were trying to send about relationships and how different they were. But I really think that in the past, decade or so that I've lived life, I've experienced a lot of these types of relationships myself in my, adult years. And so when I watched it recently in advance of this episode, like it was a little bit triggering for me initially. And I had to take a step back and like, why am I being so triggered by this? And I think it was because they painted women and men, but I was more so relating to the women so extremely. Like the characters, I mean, Gigi is a lot. She's a lot. And even like some of the women that they like kind of interviewed throughout, they have these like little spontaneous interviews with like women and men throughout the movie that aren't like the main characters, just like funny relationship tidbits where these women and men are speaking to the camera about things that they've learned. Those women were painted like so extremely. Like there was this one woman who was saying like, I reserve the right to call a guy 15 times in a row if that's what I want to do. And I'm just like, oh my gosh,
And I'm not a
like,
psycho, obviously. I was like, obviously.
yeah. And I'm just like, gosh, this is horrible. Like at first I'm thinking to myself, like, why are they doing this? Like this is overgeneralizing women and paints a negative picture of them. Like, we don't feed into this narrative that women are psychotic and clingy and needy, albeit like some women can be like that. But like, it was hard to watch because I was like, I just feel like it's an overgeneralization. But as the movie went on, I realized that the purpose of them doing that, like albeit it was uncomfortable to watch, but it was like there was a greater purpose to it. It was kind of just holding up a mirror to a lot of different archetypes that women can, might not be as extreme, but like more or less they have, tendencies or struggles that they're dealing with, and they wanted to like really define those swim lines in terms of like the characters' journeys and their personalities and that sort of a things. I eventually, warmed up to it and just embraced it because I understood like the purpose of why they were doing it halfway through the film. But it was hard to watch because I'm like, gosh, it was like I could see myself in each of the characters, but we had a happy ending for a lot of these characters, and if it wasn't a happy ending, it was a meaningful one, like lessons were learned. And I thought it just ultimately painted a really beautiful picture of like things might not go as planned with relationships. Your personality might be off-putting in relationships, but there's always something to be learned and something to be gained from each of these experiences, whether a guy calls you back or not, whether, you know, you're stood up, whether you can't find a date, whether this man doesn't want to propose to you. Like at the end of all of it, there's a reason for why you're going through it. It's to teach something about yourself to yourself. And so I thought it just really did a beautiful job. Even and like I mean, I understand too, like they needed to like bring some comedy into it. So that, you know, led to some uncomfortable conversations and scenes. But overall, like I don't think they missed the mark on that. Like I still appreciate the film, but I appreciate it even more so because like I've been in hopeless situations where I feel like, oh my gosh, like I have to start over, or I'm with the wrong person, or I'm never going to find the one. I'm still standing. I'm still here. I'm in a happy and healthy and loving relationship now. And like, even if I wasn't, I would still be okay, you know? And so I think the movie did just like a really beautiful job of capturing that. And in fact, the last line of the movie was something along the lines of like, and you never lose hope. And I just remember that being like final line before the credits started rolling. And like that really is the message. You know, you go on this long-winded journey with all these different characters, but at the end of it, like every single one of them had hope. You know, Connor Barry and Mary ended up getting together after Connor was on the back burner and a plan B for so long. Scarlett Johansson, while things didn't work out with, what was his name, Ben, the married man, ultimately learned her own self-worth and decided to, I think she was going to go on like some big international excursion with a friend to do like some self-reflection. I mean, that's a win. Like it might not have been what she had planned for, but it was definitely a win. Definitely had hope to it, you know, just all around the board. And then of course, Janine, who was married to Ben and ultimately got a divorce when he found out he was cheating with Scarlett Johansson. I mean, she got the truth that she was looking for. She was able to start new and started dating again. So, in all of these storylines, there's happiness, there's love, but at the very end, there's hope. And so I just thought that it was just a really beautiful message. So,
And it is. I watched this movie first. It came out the year my daughter was born. So I don't really remember much. I was like, well, it's a very cool rom-com, just something to get my mind off life of a new mom. And then I watched it during my divorce. And then I was like, there are much more depth in this movie. And I watched it maybe a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, I see even more layers. It was like there are complexities. And then I watched it for our episode and really from the lens of a person who's helping other women to go through such a challenging time of their lives and really thrive after divorce. I'm like, oh my God, this is a brilliant movie, absolutely genius. That you can see all of the attachment styles, you can see the myths that we create. We see how like different women tangle up in their own patterns and the fears all the characters have. I'm like, oh my gosh, we can easily talk about this movie for hours and hours and hours. And yeah, like Gigi always was so much. Like she still, I cannot say that she triggers me now, but definitely the previous times that I watched it, I was like, oh my God, she's a lot, but also she's out there. And I really like the conversation that she had with Alex that she's like, you protect yourself from being hurt. I am out there. I would rather be myself than being you. And that was so beautiful because it didn't seem like she was comfortable in her own skin. She was always jumping. She was so just like, I'm like, stop, please don't do it. Just don't jump on this guy. Or like, don't ask this. Like, don't embarrass yourself. But in the fairness, she was out there and she just kept going with a smile on her face and this big eyes of hers that was like full of and full of that innocence. And that is so beautiful. And kind of like Janine, who was avoiding. It's like it was a grotesque, right? But also, it's not really. I know people who do that. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I can see myself in many characters. I can see my friends in some of the characters and be like, that was, like you said, spot on. And it definitely just growing and going through live altering events, it definitely changed my perspective. That is not just a rom-com. This is like a perfect movie to learn all of these things that I mentioned before, and just really showing how it was portrayed, and really be, well, if I see myself more in this character, this was their development. Like you mentioned, they grew so much, they worked through so much stuff, and they became better versions of themselves. And it's such a beautiful journey. Only 2 hours, right? It was like when I was like, oh my gosh, is it 2 hours? Like, wow, that's such a long
With
movie.
us, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like,
Mhm.
was so fast, and there were so many layers. I just keep going to this, and it was like fascinating how life events really change our perspective and really bring new vision to movies, to books, to life. And it's amazing. It's kind of like awakening in a way. And I really love rewatching some of the shows because I really see more layers, like good shows, that they have a lot of depth in them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I grew as a person. I remember last time I watched this, I was having this. So for me, it's kind of like the milestones that I can really feel and touch, basically, that it's very cool. Yeah, this being one of those movies that is like definitely, next time I watch it, I will see something different. I bet. I love movies like this. And they help. They really help going through challenging times, just seeing the characters having this happy ending. I was like, well, I know it's a movie, but it happens. It happens to people like that. There is hope for me as well. If I do the work, there's hope for me at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Just really quick before we move on to the characters that we identify with, I have to pay my respects to Gigi. What you said about her being like authentic and just being like innocent and vulnerable, that, I mean, so memorable about the movie. And it's ironic because like you're cringing at her all movie long. And it's not until the very end that you're like, oh my gosh, like, well, at least for me anyway, I was like, I wouldn't have done it anything different. Like she was herself the entire time, unashamed, searching for love, and she wore her heart on her sleeve. And in like a society where we're always trying to like play it cool and have our guard up, or we're afraid to say hi to a guy at the bar or to be the first person to reach out, she was committed to it. Like she wanted to find love. Like that was her passion. And she didn't care if she came off as weird or needy. Like that's genuinely what she was looking for. And it was so innocent in that she wasn't like bogged down by societal pressures, especially, I mean, like she's way ahead of her time. Like we have even more societal pressures nowadays with like the dating apps and everything else. And I just really, really respect her for rising above all of that and just being like, no, this is who I am. And I'm determined to find somebody to spend my life with. And like, if it upsets you, that's your problem. Like, on to the next. But yeah, it was pretty cringy for me most of the movie. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But at the very end, you're just like, you gotta give it to her, like applaud her for standing up for what she believes in. I mean, I feel like, she really stood her ground in like a different way at the end of the movie. Like throughout the movie, she stood her ground by like pursuing men in the way that she identified with, but like she verbalized it at the very end to her love interest, Alex, just like, you're unhappy and I'm sorry that my, seeking of love and romance is off-putting to you, but this is who I am. And I know that I'm a lot closer to finding love than you are. And it was like mic drop, you know?
Yeah, and it
So
opened his eyes too. That he's like, oh
yes.
my gosh, if she is letting herself be so vulnerable, so out there, pouring her heart out to everybody who is happened to be around her, that was so just eye-opening for him and uplifting. And it's kind of like oh my gosh, somebody else can be this way. And just given the permission, like her being so not perfect, just being so her. Yes,
Authentic.
like, and I feel that maybe part of the reason why we cringe at her. I'm like, I maybe want to be more of her, but I wouldn't let myself be more of her. And I want to touch on the marriage piece that for me it was very interesting how the intention behind getting married. I keep going back to Janine in my mind because how can you just tell the guy and just like, well, here's the ultimatum for you. We either break up or you get married. And he was like, well, whatever, let's get married. I was like, why would she settle for less? Like, why would she settle for the guy who didn't really want to be with her?
Mm-hmm.
Or, and then Beth, played by Jennifer Aniston, that she was just having so much pressure from the society that she was missing out on the beauty of her relationship. But then Ben was bringing up this theory of his, which could be a red flag. It was like if he was different, like that could be like one of the red flags, that somebody having such a theory around why we're not doing this and convincing another person instead of listening to her and be like,
Mm-hmm.
if I love her, this is what she wants. And I'm just like been thinking a lot about marriage because it's how I view it. It basically is protecting women, giving more rights. Because if you're living with somebody and then you break up, you're out on the street with a child, without a child, but it's like you have no rights. But this, how people are like, oh, it's just a piece of paper. Well, no, not really. This piece of paper really protecting in case of a divorce. Of course, none of us think that, oh my gosh, divorce is going to happen, but as we know, it happens in a lot. And that was, I remember when I watched it a long time ago, I was thinking about it, but it didn't really, it was not more like upfront for me, but this time it was one of the lines that was upfront for me. What is the intention behind getting married? I was like, why? And they portrayed these people why they want to get married. Like Gigi was the honest of all of them. Love, like she want to be like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
this is the ultimate goal. And then the Drew Barrymore Mary character, I'm not sure if she wanted to get married, she just wanted to be with somebody, but she was kind of unsure why. So it was very interesting, just really seeing her character in depth this time. And then, but yeah, Ben, he's like, well, I married her because of like, and I always think about other women. I was like, what if there's somebody better out there? I was like, oh my God, like this is the worst marriage in from my perspective. Just
Yeah, Ben was definitely, well, very handsome. His storyline really painted the ugly side of men who get married before they're ready or who get married for the wrong reasons. And then on the flip side of that, you have Ben Affleck, who plays Neil, Jennifer Aniston's boyfriend or soon to be fiance, I guess, who is like the positive side. Well, he obviously has principles that he's sticking to in terms of not wanting to get married, but in terms of how he treats his partner and how committed he is to her, like that's the opposite of what Bradley Cooper, aka Ben, um, represents in the movie. So there's I think pros and cons to everybody that you see. Like you see people's good side and you see people's bad side for each one of these characters. Um, I appreciate that, like, in addition to showcasing women the way that they did in some of the archetypes or stereotypes, I guess I should say, that we fall under, they did the same thing for men. So it was like a pretty good balance. I think they covered a lot of bases between all of those characters.
for sure.
Mhm.
The most fun part, I think, who did you identify with and who impacted you the most out of all of the characters?
Gosh, it's hard because I think, like you said, like identified with each one of them to a certain degree. Even the men, surprisingly, like I kind of, I don't know, just in a different way, just like I felt for them. I guess I was like empathetic for some of the things that
All
they
of
were
them are
going.
very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, all very relatable for sure. And obviously, I had to pay my respects to Gigi for being so authentic. But I think the person that I identified with the most was Jennifer Aniston's character. Gosh, that's really hard. It's a tie between her and Janine because Jennifer Aniston, like I feel like I relate to her in terms of like how I carry myself and how I try not to let societal pressures get to me when I've got a good thing going, but sometimes like it does affect me. And I think one of the things I identified with the most is like I grew up with a lot of friends who got married in like their early to mid 20s, and I'm 33 and I've still never been married. And so like I felt like I was watching people, even people younger than me, get married and achieve these things that I for some reason wasn't able to achieve in my own personal life. And so emotionally, like I really connected with her because it wasn't that she was like a bad person or, you know, like all over the place or hadn't learned valuable life lessons. It was just like a matter of circumstances. And she was very true to who she was. And there was a moment between her and her dad when they were at her sister's wedding. And her sister's or her cousin got up and made some like terrible speech about Jennifer Aniston is still on the market and is like an older model or whatever.
Oh,
And
that was
it just like,
disgusting.
oh, just like
Oh,
was so disgusting. And like Jennifer Aniston got up and walked away, and her dad came over to her and like, you know, just tried to build back her spirits a little bit. And he said, you know, one of the reasons I really like you and why you're like my favorite daughter or something along those lines is because like you've always paved your own path and you don't do things just because other people tell you to. And I just thought it was like this really beautiful, special moment between like father and daughter for like a dad who's typically, or not typically, but who, you know, many dads just like want their daughter to kind of follow this specific path in life. Like you go to school, you get married, you have kids, da, da, da. And he was actually like embracing her for being different and living her life the way that she felt was best. She wasn't like, you know, forceful with her emotions or her opinions. And she wasn't so driven by the idea of getting married that she married the wrong guy. Like she was in a relationship with a man who treated her really well. And she was really patient with him because she, that relationship more than like a ring on her finger. I mean, obviously she confronted him and kind of made a deal about it because she felt that societal pressure. But, you know, they had been together for 7 years and she was obviously in it for the right reasons. And I just loved the way that she carried herself. I loved her storyline. So I really identified with her for that reason. And then it would probably be my top. But Janine, I have to talk about just briefly, played by Jennifer Connelly, because while I've never been married or, you know, gone through that situation in particular, do know the feeling of having to build back a life after the loss of a relationship. And like, I think she did a beautiful job conveying the emotion that goes along with it, like trying to hold on so tight to something that isn't working because you just like don't want to start over, even if it's like so painful and they don't treat you right. And you know, your intuition is telling you like they're lying, this isn't good. And she fought it, but eventually she ended up like starting over and starting clean. But like that raw emotion that she felt as she was making that decision to divorce him, and when she smashed the mirror on the ground, which was such an iconic moment. Like, if there's one scene I remember from that movie so vividly, it's her breaking that mirror because it's like symbolic of her saying, like, I accept this. I'm ready for like a clean start, like smashing this mirror. I'm getting the emotion out so I can like forward. And she's not like bottling it up anymore. She's not like afraid of the truth. She's like, no, I hate this. And she was visually showcasing that. And I couldn't relate because like I think as women, you know, and men too, but like we're emotional creatures. And so when a relationship ends or it's broken or we feel deceived or lied to or heartbroken, that emotion is just so powerful and we really feel into our hearts And so I think she just did a really great job of capturing that, because I too have had a long relationship. It was 4 years that I was in a relationship, and he kind of turned away as if it was not very meaningful to him, which I feel like her husband been to her. He was just kind of like indifferent and just like, he cared about her, but he was also like willing to risk it for the biscuit. No pun intended. Like he was like, there's this hot girl in front of me, and like that's worth sacrificing my whole marriage for. Like, I think women are a little bit more thoughtful about their decisions. And so, yeah, I was in a situation myself where I felt I was more thoughtful about, okay, this is like the ending of something really important. Whereas my partner was like a little bit more indifferent of like, well, we gave it a shot. Like 4 years, that's a lot of time. Their marriage, obviously, in the movie was a lot of time. They invested, in a property together. They had been married since college. So anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but I just felt like her storyline, like, how could you not feel for her? I mean, everybody, I feel like at this point, if you're, probably in your 30s, you've been in a relationship that has come to an end, or you've experienced loss to some degree. So I think she did a really great job of capturing all of the emotion that comes with that.
So agree, and I will echo that was the scene I remembered. Like that was the scene because it was so emotionally charged. And for me, also that on the brick wall, and that was a very feminine looking mirror, that
Mm-hmm.
just like a saddle on a cow, that kind of thing. And then when she broke it, it's kind of like I'm not covering up that brick wall anymore because I felt like that's what she was. She was very straightforward. She was kind of black and white, and then that was her, like the interior of her house, that was so her. And she was kind of trying to be more feminine, but then she's like, screw that, this is how I saw it this time around when I watched it. But yeah, it's so interesting how you saying that this is the scene that you've been remembering vividly. For me, same thing. I was like, throughout the
Yeah,
years, I'm like, this is what I remembered.
totally.
Like I totally in my marriage related to Janine because I wanted perfect life. I wanted perfect picture. And I thought if I create this, the inside would be perfect as well. And that was that realization of my being, she was gaslighted and they pictured it just the cigarettes, but it's a very subtle and at the same time very vivid. It was like a very good example, and he was denying it, and he clearly was looking kind of like, well, you can tell that he's lying, but she's choosing to trust him. And this is what, as a divorce coach, I hear people saying, well, why didn't I look into our finances? Why did I believe him? Why did it? And people around just creating the noise like, how could you not know this? How could you not look into this? How could you not check his phone? Like, well, because I trust this person that I live with, that I share bed with, that I share my life with. I want to trust him. And she clearly, they again played it so beautifully. Like you could tell that she didn't really believe him. You can tell that he's lying, but they chose to like, this is what part of the marriage is. I want to give
Mm-hmm.
you the benefit of the doubt, and he took advantage of it. And it was, yeah, like there's such a big disconnect. And with him, he was halfway committed. He was kind of in, kind of out. And it's like being in between. And I was like, oh, this time around, I just couldn't have any tolerance. I'm like, I cannot stand it. And before that, it was, well, it's okay. Kind of like, well, he's a very stereotypical man. But now I was like, the every cell in my body was screaming, oh my God, that is so wrong. And then I used to identify with Gigi when I was much younger. And I was like, I want to be like her. Like I felt like her inside, but I never let myself pour it out there. But I also was like, yeah, like I did feel very innocent. I did feel very trusting. I did feel kind of like, let's all have the rules that we can all be on the same page, that there is no guessing game, like let's all love each other, that kind of thing. And this time around, I really identified with Mary, Drew Barrymore's character, because I do feel like, oh my gosh, the technology, and that was 2009. So what, 15 years ago? And I was like, I can totally, totally relate to her because I do feel like, oh my gosh, like putting yourself out there is scary these days. I'm like, I don't really know. And I really, when she was going back and forth, like he emailed me, I texted him, and then he emailed my another account. It was such a mess. By the time we got the communication going, it was done and over. It's just like, what's going on? Is it just me? Or like, what is that? So that was very interesting because that next time I watch it, I will identify with somebody else. But I love Jennifer Aniston, and I was like, I didn't really identify with her. I didn't have that life situation that would be like, oh my gosh, she's relatable. She's like girl next door. But her situation was not really close to me. So maybe next time I will relate to her more. But yeah, it's so interesting. And you said archetypes and then you said stereotypes. I do feel those are the archetypes because they portray the anxiety attachment style in Gigi and avoidance attachment style in Janine. And they're like, those are the archetypes. I not gonna go into depth with others, but they just stand so strongly and independently. And their archetypes, they're like so pronounced. It is again very brilliant that it's no matter how many times you watch this movie, you're gonna see something different and identify with another character depending on where in life you are. That it's hopefully we inspired you to watch it and be prepared for part one because we're going to go in much more depth. We're going to talk about the myths that we create and the reality versus the expectation, or better say, expectation versus reality. And then we'll talk more about the relationship dynamic. We touched on that today, but we'll go more in depth. So on examples of this relationship, you can see the red flags. You can really identify what is healthy and what is unhealthy, because in all of those relationships, there are some moments of healthy and there are some moments of unhealthy. And when you have this toolbox of, in this kind of like a checklist, you will wait out healthy and unhealthy, and you can make the educated decision next time you're in a relationship. So I think it will be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do part 2 and part 3, depending on the flow. So leave us a comment.
Probably go to part 60 if we
Part 60. Oh my gosh, we can go on.
We might have to cut ourselves off at part 2, maybe 3.
Yes, let's not put a cap, and yeah, sky's the limit. I love that. Leave us a comment down below if you like us going over these movies, breaking them down. We would love to keep this movie club going because it's so much easier to see it on characters, and because they're portrayed a little bit just too much, but it's so much more visible to see the mistakes, to see the red flags, to see this and that. And it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun for us to bring this, and it's wonderful. Leave us another comment and tell us what other movies you would like us to break down and talk about. We would love to hear from you. We had a lot of fun recording this episode, and stay tuned. Thank you for joining us on Navigating the Aftermath. Remember, no matter how challenging the journey may seem, you are not alone. Subscribe for more empowering stories, practical wisdom to help you navigate life's twists and turns. Until next time, keep moving forward with courage and conviction.